I voted Remain on Brexit, yet I wanted to make a video on the positive aspects of the UK leaving the EU. Brexit has been a traumatic experience for the UK. It divided the country, and the debate has been oversimplistic, reduced to a binary decision of being a Brexiteer or Remainer. 7 years after the vote, the debate hasn't really improved. This all hasn't been helped by the stream of incompetent politicians that have been trying to implement Brexit. The truth is that this is an extremely complex issue, yet the reductivism and oversimplistic binary nature of the level of debate means that the UK still hasn't navigated its way to any position of unity about the best way forward. Brexit has happened, and I don't think it's going to be reversed for at least a generation. Even then, I think that rejoining the EU will be very difficult, even possibly impossible. Thus, we have to make the best of Brexit. In this regard, I thought it would be useful to make a video on the benefits of Brexit to understand how the UK can make the best of it. The first point to make is that there is an argument that the UK is actually better off outside the EU because the EU is growing out of control. It's evolved beyond what the UK joined, well beyond in fact. I think that there are two main issues here. Firstly, political union, and secondly, the number of members. On political union, the trajectory of the EU towards deeper political integration, potentially leading to a federal superstate. This prospect was unattractive to many in the UK who valued national independence and identity. When the UK joined, it was an economic union, the European Economic Community. Over the decades, the movement towards a United States of Europe at times seems unstoppable. There is a sense in which I think the EU project has its own kind of institutional momentum. I don't think the EU pauses enough to think about what the long-term strategy is. This was becoming increasingly problematic for the UK, even for many Remainers, including me. The second point on the number of member states. When the UK joined, there were 9 member states in total. By 1985, there were 15 member states. By 2013, there were 28 members. And there are 10 additional countries currently in talks about EU membership, which would take the number of countries up to 38. My own view is that if the EU had remained at 15 member states, we probably would not have had Brexit. Obviously, the loss of sovereignty for each member state gets greater as the EU grows, and the accession of all the Eastern European countries resulted in large movements of people from the new member states into the UK. Nobody was concerned with free movement when there were just 15 member states, but allowing a group of poorer countries to join inevitably meant that there were large movements of people heading for higher paid jobs in the original member states. I think that 28 members was probably too many. 38 members is definitely too many. The EU could still run into problems, I think, and the UK may be better off outside of a massively expanding EU. The second thing to talk about is sovereignty. I have decades of experience in working with the EU and the European Commission. The Commission, basically the civil service of the EU, has so much power. As the EU has expanded, the influence of each member state has become weaker. Often it's the Commission that has all the institutional knowledge and expertise, which allows it a disproportionate influence over EU policy. There is a massive disconnect between these EU bureaucrats and the individual citizens of each member state. This always made me a little bit uncomfortable. I'm a big believer in the importance of the individual having a stake in decisions that affect our everyday life. We've already seen a process of devolution in the UK with Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and with an increasing number of English regions having mayors with significant powers. Brexit might be seen as another part of this process. In order to ensure continuity, the UK merely adopted all EU legislation into UK law. The idea was that it would review all these laws and remove or amend the ones that need to change to better meet UK circumstances. It's been slow in doing this, but I think that there is some room for the UK to be quite strategic in adapting all this legislation in order that it works best for the UK. The third positive point about Brexit relates to policy independence. This is related to the sovereignty point, but it is just worth stressing that having sovereignty means that the UK can decide on its own policies. The UK can set its own customs laws, decide who it wants to have free trade agreements with, set its own health and safety, environmental and labour laws, etc., etc. It's here where the Brexiteers are frustrated, I think. Currently, most of the legislation is still aligned with the EU original. There's been some talk of a bonfire of EU regulations or complete deregulation to a Singapore-on-Thames. I don't think this is a good idea at all, but I do think that the government could perhaps have a more systematic programme of reviewing this legislation to see what could be changed. We need to balance the negatives that come for UK business from diverging too much from the EU with strategic advantages that might be gained by tailoring the law to work better for the UK. I think that there's an argument that all of the political parties should be involved in this process, as well as UK industry. The fourth point on Brexit concerns the labour market. When the EU was 15 members, free movement of people worked well. Labour market conditions were more or less equal between the different member states, so there were no mass movements of population. However, when the EU expanded eastwards to include a large number of lower wage countries, this caused a large number of people moving to the higher wage UK. This was a big boost to UK business, access to a very large source of cheap labour. However, it can be argued that this actually undermined the UK labour market for British workers. Absent an effectively unlimited cheap labour supply, where an industry faced labour shortages, it would have to increase wages and provide training to attract people into the jobs. It might be argued that access to this massive cheap labour supply has made low-wage jobs much lower than they should have been for an advanced economy like the UK. In conclusion, I think that, even for a Remainer, there are some areas where the UK can take advantage of being outside of the EU. It's very easy to keep harping on about how, from a purely economic point of view, the UK is worse off outside of the EU. We're out now and we have to make the best of it. I'll probably still make videos in the future where more evidence emerges of the economic difficulties that the UK created for itself through Brexit. But I'm happy to make a video identifying the areas where there are positive aspects of Brexit. I'm not a nationalistic patriot, but I do believe that the UK is a great country to live in with a lot of entrepreneurial talent. We can still have a good economic future, but we need a complete change in government policy on tax and spending, which is the subject of other videos. I hope you found this information useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.